I hope you enjoyed the coffee or the tea or, the food, um, especially the fried bannock. I love that. Yeah, that I made. I spend my morning doing this. Yeah, right. I've got the best recipe at home. Okay, so we're going to move to our next speaker, Conor Kerr. Conor is a national award-winning Métis Ukrainian writer and bird hunter. I want to know everything about that. Living in Amisquatchie, Waskahigan. Born in Saskatoon, raised in Buffalo Pound Lake and Drayton Valley. He is a member of the Métis Nation of Alberta. His Ukrainian family are settlers on Treaty 4 territory. Conor is the author of the Relit Award-winning and Giller long-listed novel Avenue of Champions, the Giller shortlisted novel Prairie Edge, which I want absolutely to read, and the poetry collections An Explosion of Feathers, and the Governor General's shortlisted Old Gods, and the forthcoming poetic novella Beaver Hills Forever. He is also an assistant professor in the Department of English and Film Studies at the University of Alberta, where he's currently working on editing a third novel, Duck Blind. So the title of his presentation, sorry, my goodness, what's going on? Bringing the Bison Back, a commentary on social media perceptions of Indigenous activism through the novel Prairie Edge. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I tried to get a really good academic title, just to really lean into those kind of things. I'll speak a little bit to that, but I'll speak a little bit to just a few different kind of components in general of the way that this book, Prairie Edge, kind of just sees Indigenous peoples in the city here. So thank you for the warm introduction. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm actually banned from speaking at Rupert's Line Institute events because of my penchant for swearing at the Belcourt Brosso Métis Awards alumni speeches. So it's nice to be back doing these ones here. Very risky, yeah. No, I'm just joking. Well, I'm not actually kind of joking, but that was a long time ago now. I'm going to kick us off by reading one of my favorite scenes from this book. I love writing radio scenes. It's one of my favorite things to do. So if you're familiar, and I like making fun of land acknowledgements also and people's perceptions of them. So I tried to combine those into the same thing. And it's my kind of version of a land acknowledgement to kick it off. If you're familiar with CBC AM radio here, this is very much based on Mark Connolly and Tara McCarthy as the hosts of it. And I'm good friends with Mark's son, and so I had to change and edit out the names at the very last minute to make it more without that there. So in this moment in this book here, the Métis activists have stolen a herd of bison from Elk Island National Park and released them into the river valley. I turned the radio on. CBC News was in the middle of its hourly broadcast. More buffalo trouble on the prairies. An area golf course was shut down today after a herd of bison escaped from a ranch outside of Camrose sometime between last night and early this morning. They blocked traffic on Highway 833 before moving on to the Camrose golf course. City staff, assisted by the local rancher, are still working on rounding up the buffalo. People are asked to avoid the area until authorities tell them it's safe. Meanwhile, back in Edmonton, protesters continue to block the entrance into Dawson Park. The protest movement is now calling itself Sokapisigaw Pascoamostos, which translates from the Cree to Bison Strong. Local ally Aaron Green has made shirts and bumper stickers with the hashtag Bison Strong. We have Aaron with us in the studio here today. So Aaron, can you tell us a little bit about what you're hoping to accomplish with your shirts and bumper stickers? Well, first off, I like to acknowledge that I'm on Treaty 6 territory and the ancestral homeland of the Métis peoples. Yes, yes, yes. We'd also like to acknowledge that. Thank you, Aaron. So, when I first saw the bison, I thought, oh my God, they must belong in the river valley. This is like their home, and we took it from them. So, we should do everything that we can to help them stay here. Aaron, can you tell us a little bit about where the proceeds from the Bison Strong sales are going? From every shirt or sticker that's sold, I'll donate 10% back to the activist group. It's my way of moving forward with reconciliation and letting the Bison know that they have a home here. Amazing work, Aaron, and I'm sure the protesters thank you for your generosity. No problem. Thank you for having me. There you have it. You can get your stickers and shirts from bisonstrong.ca. I know I'm getting one. So I don't actually have any idea about how to bring the bison back into the river valley. I feel a funny thing about being a writer is you have a ridiculous Google search history, like how to load bison onto trailer. Yeah, can I steal bison from Elk Island National Park? And so I don't actually know how to do that. But there are some organizations that do. International Buffalo Relations Institute, they do an incredible work on the restoration of bison to these landscapes. Tasha Hubbard had that incredible documentary, Singing the Buffalo Back, that did their work. And I'm also going to preface this by saying as well that I don't know anything about politics. There are people who are a lot smarter than me who study and can speak better about those kind of things. And I don't think that adding my voice into an echo chamber for whatever my algorithm is tailored towards accomplishes anything productive. But I do know a few things about writing books, or at least I like to think so at this point. So when I was an undergrad student here, taking history, English, and creative writing courses, I wanted to be a writer. But to me, being a writer meant pretending to be someone that you weren't. I didn't think that I had any stories worth telling, and so I wrote horrible juvenilia fiction about people in New York, Toronto, Chicago, places I had never been. Then I took Native Studies 280, was I think the course title and code, with Marilyn Dumont. A course that told me that my family had a valid story, that the voice of Métis in Alberta mattered, a story that should be shared. And I wrote a short story in that class based on my family's history on the road allowances north of St. Paul de Métis. It was called The Last Big Dance, and it would be collected in Best Canadian Short Stories 2020 and would become the opening chapter for my first novel, Avenue of Champions. Prairie Edge looks at the way that Western people perceive Indigenous activism, the disassociation of people towards different movements, the perception of Indigenous activists through social media or the lack thereof, and the ironic and often hypocritical stances that people, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, take. The book follows the perspectives of Gray, a Métis activist and Native Studies alumni from the very made-up community of Pembina Creek, Alberta. I've actually had lots of people contact me and be like, so where is the Pembina Creek Métis settlement? Where is Pembina Creek, Alberta? I've been Googling and looking and I cannot find it. And I'm like, it doesn't exist. It's very much made up. Yeah. It's a work of fiction, this book. So it follows Gray and her buddy Ezzy, short for Isidore, for those who know the old revolutionary names, as they steal a herd of bison from Elk Island and release them. There are a couple other characters, including Tyler, Gray's ex-boyfriend, a brand builder, a social media influencer, who we'll talk more about in a bit. So one of the themes that I wanted to explore in this book was how audiences view Indigenous activists on social media. And if you looked at a character like Tyler's Instagram, you'd see a photo of him with a couple elders from his community, and then a photo of him in front of a group of youth talking, then a photo of a sunrise with a teepee in the background, and then a selfie with him and another prominent Native influencer. I'm going to read another section with Tyler in an interview. I have a lot of radio interviews in here, so another radio interview that Tyler's a part of. We spoke with the lead organizer from the protests, Tyler Cardinal, who maintains that the protesters will be staying put until the river valley is designated as Indigenous land and the bison have the right to stay there. Tyler, thanks for joining us today in the studio. We know it must have been hard to leave your fellow protesters to come and speak with us. Thank you for having me. It's always incredibly hard to leave the land that holds so much of my family history, memory, blood, sweat, and tears. Did you know that that area of the river valley was once First Nations reserve land? I did not know that. Thank you for telling us. It's good for everyone to be able to learn more about the true Indigenous histories of place. That's how we can move things forward towards a true state of reconciliation. I'd be more than happy to help educate anytime. Now, Tyler, what would an ideal outcome be for the protests? Return all the land, to bring the bison back as they were before colonization, to return the prairies to the matriarchal governance structures of the Indigenous communities that were here beforehand. It's also important to note that it's the women and Two-Spirit peoples who lead these protests. We're just here to support those who are truly doing the work. Very well said. Now, some people say that the bison are a threat. What do you think of that? The bison aren't any more of a threat than the whole system of colonization is. Bison are natural here, and we need to honor their kindred spirits if we're going to become whole as Indigenous peoples again. We're all in this together against a capitalist state that has turned the prairies into a massive resource extraction enterprise. We need to move back to a true sense of collectivism if we're going to be able to progress as peoples on these territories. We need all the allies for the fight that we can get. Well said again, Tyler. And you have two allies in us here. Thank you again for joining us, Tyler. And if anyone has any questions or wants to learn more, where can they do that? You can follow me on Instagram at tcards or on Twitter, and all the updates will be coming from my social media. And I also want to note that I have a consulting company and that we're available for business. So with a guy like that, I hope you got he's saying all the perfect words. He's using every single possible buzzword that you can possibly bring into that radio interview, selling his consulting company, bringing that out, he's also, I like the idea of, this guy saying, like, yeah, we need to honor the women and the Two-Spirit people, but then he's the one who's, actually the one saying it and talking about it. So Tyler's a person who's building his brand. And as much as I make fun of that, I kind of also am like, good for him. Like, get that money. Yeah, you got some hubris, sure. But do we need people like Tyler out there? People who get the message across to a larger audience? And even though in this book, he's an absolute shit ass to Gray, he does help her out a lot. And Gray's also really, like kind of mean to Ezzy in this book. And Ezzy's kind of mean to his auntie. And Auntie is just the best across the board. She's not mean to anyone. She's great. So I always kind of wonder, like, even though this Tyler character is, someone who's building a brand, he's doing all this stuff, he's got his consulting company, saying the perfect words, he's doing all these kind of things. Is there a place for a character like Tyler in the way that we are as Indigenous peoples, as Métis peoples are kind of moving forward? Does he actually get some more of that information out there? I make fun of land acknowledgements a lot, but I kind of like that, most people know that there was Métis history on these lands here. I like that people know that there's that we're on Treaty 6, and a decade ago, no one knew that. So there's more that obviously people have wrote about that, but we can move those things forward. And I kind of would prefer, honestly, that any Indigenous person gets that Sunyao from the Munyao rather than Deloitte or Myers Norris Penny. So another thing that I wanted to yap about quick was kind of just the neoliberal attitude towards Indigenous peoples in this book. And the people who are really excited about going to a protest and reposting everything on Instagram, social media warriors. And in this book, I have the scene, I'll read it to you, where this protest ends up in Terwilliger Park in the backyard of people and professors and others who, really want to support Indigenous people. They really want to support Indigenous land back movements. They will repost every single little thing on Instagram, and they won't recheck it or fact check it or see what any of the sources are. But then when, all of a sudden there's a herd of bison in their dog park and they can no longer walk the dogs around, things look a little bit different. Let's read a quick little scene from this here. It was a park in a suburban area for affluent people who wanted to stay close to the downtown core but still own their McMansions with massive yards and have enough space for their king-size beds. People were pissed off here about the bison. They needed space to walk their dogs and do fitness classes. When that was taken away from them, even if it was just temporary, they came out with the kind of ferocity that we tried to rile up in climate change protests back in the day. This was natural, though, hard to force it. One side was full of university-age students who'd set up barricades and signs that proclaimed bison reclamation and land back. On the other side, a group of 30 or so were standing across from the protesters and screaming at them, mainly older white people in their 50s and 60s. I parked my car off to the side and rolled down the window so I could hear and see better. "Go back to your avocado toast, you entitled little shits," one of the counter-protesters yelled. "You get that from Reader's Digest?" a protester countered. "You're the reason this world is so messed up," another counter-protester yelled. 200 yards away at the end of the clearing, I could see the bison moving back and forth through the trees and munching on grass, oblivious to everything around them, content to just hang out where the food was. So one of my favorite things when I'm writing and going to events and doing talks and whatnot is this classic interview question: when did you first find out that you were Métis? And I was think like, I don't know, when did I first have conscious thought? Like, but I've never thought about that. I've never thought about the idea of being Métis. It's been something that's just kind of been built up in my head. I've grew up with my grandmother. My grandmother is a very proud, strong Métis woman. She's a Cree speaker. She moved to Vancouver Island when she was like 87 years old and plays crib kind of semi-professionally with her Cree friend out there now. But her and my auntie did a ton of research when well before I was born, on our genealogy and our history. And they grew up in proud Métis families as well. And I grew up knowing where we came from. I knew of an ancestor, Francois Gladue, who came here in 1790 into these same spaces and would have been hanging out in these areas. And and I knew about these people from when I was a kid and drove around and was able to kind of learn these stories. And I was always proud to be Métis, and we were told to be proud to be Métis, not Cree, not Dene, not Niitsitapi, but Métis. And in my writing, I want to continue to build an ecosystem. That's my academic word that I threw into this lecture today, ecosystem, of literature that speaks to the Métis millennial experience. I keep joking about writing a modern Métis millennial romance novel at some point. But even then, I'm basically just writing to my own experiences here as well. And I get that I grew up in a space, in an area, by understanding this, where I feel like I have a lot more privilege than others. We all know the colonialism and the effects that it's had on taking away story and taking away voice throughout this too. But I also feel that in my writing and whatnot, I want to create a sense of joy. I want to create a sense of purpose, a sense of place for Métis peoples. I don't believe that every story of Métis going forward need to be traumatic. I have lived a very joyful life. I have a lot of fun with my cousins. I have a lot of fun with my aunties, with my grandparents. And so I believe that there is a true place for Métis joy within writing as well. In Prairie Edge, Gray knows exactly who she is. Ezzy, not so much, but he starts to figure it out with the help of his aunt, an elder at the rehab center, and Gray. He's starting to piece together the puzzle of who he is. Ezzy's a guy who's disassociated from life. He's a product of government systems that are intended to destroy his identity, and he's trying to find something to belong to. And if that's a protest movement that restores bison to the prairies, then sure, he'll tag along. He's the kind of guy who wants to feel a sense of community and belonging, a sense of purpose. So this is right where, I'll read a quick little scene where Ezzy and his buddies decide to go down to a climate change kind of protest at the government legislature buildings. Right when he first kind of meets Gray here as well. I had been hanging around with a couple guys from the neighborhood. We figured that our best bet to meet women was to attend the protests going on all throughout that year. We would bike or take the train downtown and join in on whatever event was happening. These guys couldn't really give a shit about the causes. They were just fired up about the beautiful women who came to the protests. The idea was that white university women would love the authenticity of a bunch of native guys supporting the protests. It never worked out that way, of course. We were all too shy to actually talk to anyone. After a few weeks of going to these events, my friends faded out. The dream of dating white university women dead. But I kept showing up. I liked listening to the different speakers talk about climate change and Indigenous rights. Something in the messaging spoke to me. It made me feel like maybe all of this shit we had to live with was placed there by a system and not because we just didn't know any better. I like the idea that we were descended from warriors and people who fought for their rights, that our ancestors didn't just roll over and let colonizers onto the land, the kind of pitiful narrative that I'd been taught when I was a kid. This contradicted that shit. I think that sense of disassociation is a reality for a lot of Métis men, and this experience of life is often diminished when we aren't playing into the stereotypes that have been created for us by Western society, and honestly, sometimes our own communities. Were you out hunting today? Nope, never held a gun in my life. Did you go to ceremony? Also never done that. How about jigging? Did you jig? Buddy, does it look like I can jig? Were you doing your part to dismantle the colonial oppressor today? Dude, I'm just trying to pay my bills, hang out with my grandma and my cousins, and have a beer or two. Wow, you drink? That's so non-Indigenous of you. Do you even own any beadwork? What makes someone's experience more valid than another one? I don't think about being Métis. I don't wake up in the morning and think that I need to go out and perform the act of being Métis. I just am. It's interwoven into my way of being, and I don't have to consciously think about it. Should I post more on social media about being Métis? Should I repost every little thing without fact checking it? Or should I just continue to post photos of dogs, friends, family, books, and other things that bring me joy within that moment? And honestly, that's what I'm going to do because I want to go to the island and I want to play crib with my grandmother. I also write a lot of crib scenes in here. It's one of my favorite things to do. And digression, but my grandmother, who is very she's a very loud lady, I would say. She does not give a shit about writing or books or anything like that. She's like, oh, cool, another book. Yeah, great. But she does she's very proud of me because one time I got 29 in a hand of crib. And she will talk about that to this day with her friends constantly. Yeah. So I'm the favorite grandkid because of that 29 there. So that's one of the things that I like doing. I like going to my cousins. I like writing books. I like teaching these courses here. I feel that we can do more about those little moments of joy and, this space in this area that is our home. I want to hear the fiddle music coming out of the ravine. I want to hear the stories of others as they're going up. I feel there's so much place for Métis literatures. I feel there's so much more that we can do to build up that collective sense of community as Métis people, and how much more we can do to capture these stories as we continue on with this too. So I'm going to continue to write books. Hopefully someone continues to read them, and I'm going to write that authentic Métis experience because that's my experience. So it's going to be a Métis book no matter what. Thank you. Can I ask something?
Thank you very much, Conor. So, any questions for Conor?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask, it seems like you're outlining a tension between this, I don't want to call it a performance of authenticity, because I think there is authenticity to it, but this person, hosting the sunset with the TV on social media, and this idea that, on one hand, it's creating a visibility for Métis culture, but on the other hand, potentially excluding people who don't have all of those things on their social media. And you talked about enjoying the moments of everyday life, of joy, and how those, it seems like you're suggesting there might be a bit of incompatibility between those everyday moments of joy and some of the things that people are expected to post on social media. And I'm curious, like, do you think there's a tension? Have you reconciled, or I'm just very curious.
Yeah, I I don't know. I feel like for like this character in general, like Tyler, he's just based on a lot of people that I know and some people that I'm even friends with, you know, who are guys who are like doing and maneuvering in this kind of world this way, and that's their way of kind of like existing. And for them, like they find that to be fine, but they're also probably giving across this impression for others that they're not necessarily like as indigenous or as authentically, you know, Métis or First Nations or Inuit because they're not posting the perfect kind of like photos as they're going through. And I think that's one of the things that social media social media influencers and especially like indigenous influencers, it's been a great medium to get stories and voice and more information and knowledge about culture out into the world, but it's also come with all the negative aspects that social media comes with, that, you know, division within like community, division within kind of groups, you know, should you be sharing these type of things, should you not be doing those type of things? And so I feel there's just this yin and like yang that essentially comes with those, and that everyone should just be kind of using them for their own, like what makes them happy anyways at the end of the day. And for some of these people, if it's building their brand and getting more of their messaging out there or getting work or those type of things, sure. I'm hoping that the people who, you know, follow me on social media are just, they want to see photos of my dog and maybe the book that I'll like post, and that's kind of it. But I think it's kind of just using those to the best of your own mental health capacities, if that makes sense.
I'm just curious where this idea of Métis joy or indigenous joy
Mhm.
comes from. To be quite honest, I really don't like it. It's like, we are joy.
Yeah.
What the hell? Why do we have to do Métis joy?
Yeah.
I don't know what that's about, and I don't know where it came from, but I see it also in the literature, like, oh, talk about joy. But it's like, when I think of trauma, I don't think of them as just trauma narratives. We have a practice of witnessing.
Mhm.
We witness in ceremony, we witness in circle, and I think we can witness in our books too.
Mhm.
So I don't know where the idea of witnessing joy comes from.
Yeah. I think, and very much obviously agree with that. But I think when I'm thinking about the idea of joy myself, it's that I I don't always need to read a negative story. I want to read kind of sometimes just a fun story of, you know, Métis people. Like I just read this I just did a review for the book Métis Matriarchs. And so there were so many beautiful stories in this book that sure they had, you know, these instances of the everything that these women had to go through to establish everything there, but this book also contained their stories of their love, their life, their family, all these different beautiful things that they had done in creating this world and these kinship networks in their spaces. And to me, that reads as joy as well. You know, something that when I'm reading it, I can see the strength within that community, where I feel that I don't want to personally necessarily read books that don't have that same level of showing the strength of community and the strength of love for each other in that rather. So I think that's more what I see within that, but absolutely agree with the idea of like witnessing. And if, you know, you're reading through this book or Old Gods or even the new Beaver Hills Forever when it comes out, like there definitely, it's not all just, you know, puppies and bison running free on the prairies and these type of things either. There's a lot of the effects of colonialism and how that's impacted Indigenous peoples and specifically Métis peoples. And from, I try to only write really from my family's perspective within this kind of space and area. But how, you know, with, you know, this love that my grandmother and my aunties had for building up our own family, we were able to take kind of joy from that and build that forward too.
Hello, so I attend Miss Dumont's Métis literature class. I recently read your book. So I asked my professor this question, and I thought I'd ask you as well. How
Yeah.
exactly you get a start in terms of your literary career as a Métis person and just generally as a writer?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I was taking, I did undergrad creative writing courses here. I wrote bad stories, like they were just some juvenilia, some bad poetry at the time. I really enjoyed it. They were not good. And then when I kind of came back and was taking Marilyn's course, and we were talking about our own narratives and the way that we can shape story, and I thought of my grandmother and her grandmother who were kicked out of this area within Edmonton and ended up on the road allowances north of St. Paul, and how my grandmother's grandmother had to she was widowed at a young age from the Spanish flu that went through, and she ended up, she made moonshine to sell to make a living in that area, and she had just this incredible story of raising her family in this space. And going to these events and doing these different things. And they talked about going up to the big barn dances at Kikino or at Buffalo Lake. And I thought, this is actually like a story that I have a voice for, that I have some knowledge of, that I can actually bring something to. And so I really wanted to craft that. And it actually, honestly, kind of just inspired within doing that, a realization that there's so much more stories within this land around us, that there's so much more stories within our community, and they are beautiful stories, and they should be kind of shared. And I started trying to write those out more so than, me trying to write a story about something that I've never done or lived or whatnot in that space too. When it came to publishing, it was, so I finished my Master of Fine Arts. I had this book, which was Avenue of Champions, and I thought it was going to immediately get published. A lot of the books stories had been published in literary mags. And I kind of had this cocky attitude that, this was going to get out there and it was going to be good. I had their literary CV, a few other things. And then it just didn't go anywhere. And it just sat there, and I sent it to absolutely everyone. No one was interested in it. No one wanted a story about Edmonton. No one wanted a story about Métis peoples in Edmonton. No one wanted a short story collection. You got all, those were even just excuses. Often I never even heard back. And then a friend of mine who I took undergrad creative writing courses with, Dr. Norma Dunning, she sent it to her publisher and directly, and they read it and they were like, yep, we're going to put it out. But if it wasn't for Dr. Norma Dunning to sending that out, it would never have probably seen the light of day, honestly. I was pretty ready to kind of just give up on it at that point. And so I often tell my students in my creative writing courses, because when I was doing undergrad creative writing with Norma, like a long time ago now, like I never dreamt that, that would be the connection that got my book published, kind of thing. And you never know who you're kind of connecting with. And there's no need to burn bridges or do any of those kind of things, because these people might come around in your life in any of these moments. So just be your authentic self and make sure that you keep those connections going, because there's enough negativity in this world anyways. We may as well keep those things open.
And did you have a literary agent?
Not at the time. I do now, but he's actually the incoming writer in residence for next year, Cody Catano, and he's a Portuguese Anishinaabe guy from Toronto. So he's the only Indigenous literary agent in the country, as far as I know. And it's there's still not enough people working in those aspects of the publishing world. I would love to have Indigenous editors. Or a Métis editor, but I just aren't really any. And the big presses are still a little bit hesitant to hire within those spaces. So I would love to see, my kind of dream for the publishing world would be that if I'm publishing a book like Prairie Edge with Penguin, that I can work with a Métis editor on it as I'm going through those processes. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Conor. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you, Marilyn, again for sharing your stories. So I wish you all the best. Have a great evening, and we'll see you for the next one. And then, I have a few presents for our guest. Thank you very much.